Welcome to a special Lunch and Learn seminar presented by Huddleston Bowen and Volunteer West Virginia. For information about upcoming seminars, go to www.huddlestonbowen.com/events. To view videos of past seminars, visit e4b-huddlestonbowen.com. Today's seminar is Preparing for Disaster. Is your business ready?
Good afternoon, I'm Elizabeth Ayers. I'm with Cabell Huntington Health Department, and I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about a new program that we have at the Health Department. I thought this would be a great opportunity to let you all know that we have a special needs registry. This is something that is brand new to West Virginia, and right now it's in 9 counties, which includes Cabell, Wayne, Lincoln, Logan, Mason, Mingo, Jackson, and Boone, and Putnam. I think I got all of them. But basically, it's a special needs registry designed to identify anyone in those counties that has a special need. Special needs are anything from a physical need, a mental need. I often use my mom as an example because she would hate that I would talk about this. But, she has a CPAP machine that she uses every night to go to bed. And although she may not, you may not look at her and think she has a special need, but she does. She has to have electricity every evening to go to sleep at night.
Good morning. As she said, I'm David Skeen. I am a continuity coordinator for the state. In a nutshell, what that means is I help people with their continuity of operations plans, development of them. We'll start out, I'm going to give you just an abbreviated presentation on continuity planning. In a nutshell, continuity planning is what is your plan to keep doing the things that you absolutely have to keep doing when something interrupts or threatens to interrupt normal operations. That's what continuity planning is. Now, I always like to tell people what continuity planning is not. I deal with a lot of government organizations, response organizations, law enforcement, fire, emergency, medical, and I've lost count of how many of them will submit a continuity plan to me, and actually what they submit me is an emergency operations plan. It's, oh, there's a flood in our community, this is what we're going to do. There's a hurricane in our community, this is what we're going to do. The continuity planning is not how you're responding when someone else is the victim. It's how you're responding when you're the victim. Now, depending on the event, you may have both, and they may be activated both at the same time. If you're a fire department and your building is in a floodplain and there's a flood, well, you're probably operating under emergency operating procedures in response to everyone else, but you're also operating your continuity plan because you're a victim as well. But an emergency operations plan is not a continuity plan. Another common thing I see is I'll get continuity plans, and here's what we'll do if the fire alarm goes off. Here's what we'll do if a shooter comes into the building. Here's what we'll do if there's some other emergency, and what they're telling me is what their plan is to deal with that emergency. But they don't tell me what their plan is afterwards. And I always find that sort of amusing because, take fire alarms for example. What have we known since kindergarten? If a fire alarm goes off, we do what? We get up, get in an orderly line, go outside and call the fire department. And we've known that since we were this tall. Now, something happens to us when we're adults. At the Capitol, the fire alarm goes off and we all go, oh, what's this? And stand around and don't exit the building. But we know that. But I'll get these plans that will have pages and pages of this is what we do if the fire alarm goes off. But they don't have anything about, okay, the fire department showed up, put the fire out, but now your building is down and out of commission for the next 3 weeks. How are you going to continue to operate? That's what a continuity plan is for, is what are you doing after the fire is out. And what the goal of continuity planning is, it's to keep you operating or doing the things that you absolutely have to do until you can get back to normal operations. That's always the goal, is to get back to normal operations. The FEMA model breaks it down into 10 areas: essential functions, delegations of authority, orders of succession, alternate facilities, alternate communications, human capital, vital records, devolution, reconstitution, and test, training, and exercise. if you look at any of those standards, they may call them different things, they may have other things in there, but they're all really dealing with those same areas. And what I tell people is, what it all boils down to, here's continuity planning in a nutshell. What do you absolutely have to keep doing? Who do you need to do those things? My technical term. What stuff do they have to have in order to do that job? And then, what risk pose a threat to any of those things? But that's continuity in a nutshell. I don't care if you want to take those 10 groups or take one of those other standards. You're always looking at those things. What do I absolutely have to keep doing? Who do I have to have in order to do that? What resources do they have to have in order to do that job? And then what poses a threat to those, and what can I do to eliminate or mitigate or minimize that threat? And if the threat does impact one of them, what's my plan to carry on even though I've lost this person or lost this resource? What's the process for all this? I've told you all this. How do you do this? Well, look at what you do, and you know, your organization does a lot of things, but not everything we do has to continue. You remember, we're just talking about a temporary situation where something's impacted. What things can you absolutely not stop? You know, if you're a 911 center, you can't stop receiving emergency calls and dispatching emergency services. Those things have to continue. Well, that's the same thing you're doing in examining what your organization does, is what things do you absolutely have to keep doing, what things can you put off. The things you can put off, you don't worry about. The things that you have to keep doing, those are what you need to address. Just as a warning, don't overlook things that you may not think about, like if you're a hospital, oh sure, we got to keep the emergency room going, but if you want staff to keep showing up, you probably need to keep paying those people. You know, put off their paycheck for a day, they'll grumble and complain, but they'll probably still show up for work. Put their paycheck off for a month, and suddenly your ER might not be staffed. So payroll, those type of things. You know, what support services keep those essential functions going? You need to look at those things.
If you're preparing a COOP plan, you're not alone. There's a lot of resources out there for businesses and for individuals if they need help with it. It can get very complicated, and you can get tied down in the overall books and how to do this, and the templates, and it's very rigid and everything else. From my standpoint, if it's not flexible, I can't use it. It has to be flexible to meet my needs, because my environment changes every day. And if my plan can't flex with the environment and where I am, it's no good to me. Another thing that David said, you need to go ahead. Planning is the root of it. The plan itself is great, but it's the process of planning. You got to get it out and use it. If you just stick it up on a shelf and you never use it, it doesn't do any good. So you need to get it out, practice it, and use the stuff that's in there that you spent so much time with it, and use it on an everyday basis. With healthcare, it's been very important. We've been doing this for a long time. We've called it other things, and COOP planning's been around for a long time, I think since actually the 30s and 40s. It's been called different stuff, but the federal government had a COOP plan back in that time. It's just now getting back around to business and having businesses do COOP plans. With myself, it gets kind of messy, and I told David earlier, I'm so afraid I'm going to get up here and I'm going to say something and he's just going to go, oh, that's not right, that's not what you're supposed to do, it's not a COOP plan. Because there are several different types of plans. You have an emergency preparedness plan, you have your COOP plan, and several other plans, and there's supposed to be a distinction between the different ones. Well, you know, in our facility, I try to, they're kind of all one and the same. And once again, I see them going, oh, you're not supposed to have the emergency preparedness plan. But with the way healthcare is, and I know there's several healthcare people in the audience today, and it's good to see. It's how you continue on. How am I going to progress from the incident and then survive it after that, and then get back and transition back to normal operations? So anything can trigger our facility to go into emergency preparedness mode or something along that lines. It could be an internal or an external. But the first thing that we always did was do our hazardous vulnerability analysis. Always look at what your environment is out there. What are some of the big things that can happen that's going to stop me from providing the service that I provide? The one thing that I always look at is what's going to affect the quality of care. If something happens, there's so many other variables out there. Something's going to affect the quality of care and inhibit us from performing what we need to do. We enact our plan. It could go from a water pipe breaking and flooding an area, or a total loss of water going into the hospital. Or it could be just that the water's turning brown. So, we have plans. Okay, what happens? So what are we going to do? How are we going to continue with providing operations? Well, as you said, we may not be able to provide the same service that we have to. Water's been compromised. We're going to have to shut down some of our services. Dialysis. We may not be able to perform dialysis because of the quality of the water. May not be able to perform surgeries. People can't wash their hands. I mean, there's all little tiny things. So you have to sit there in the planning and thinking through and the processes and the steps. Loss of power. How are we going to go through and get power back into the facility? It gets very complicated. And the one thing I just want to say, there's help out there. Even David's here to help. But locally, we have great resources locally with Gordon Mary and the Office of Emergency Services and his new sidekick, Jerry Beckett. So he knows a lot about food planning too.
Let me start out with something simple, a snow emergency. Washington Works in Parkersburg employs about 1,700 DuPonters, and we may have anywhere from 200 to 800 contractors working at the site at any particular time. We are one of the largest businesses, of course, in Wood County and also going over into Washington County, Ohio. In the mid-1990s, we had 2 snow emergencies that were substantial enough that on the West Virginia side, the governor declared a state of emergency and shut the roads down. As a chemical business, we're a 24/7 operation. It's not a matter of pushing a button and turning the lights out and leaving. A lot of hazard, what we call high hazard operations, where you have to keep the process running and moving, or else you're creating a secondary situation with it. So anyway, what we got into was over about initially about a 2 to 4 hour period, a shift change of folks calling in with things being published over the radio. If you get out on the roadway, you're going to be subject to arrest by law enforcement. So folks didn't know what to do and create quite a turmoil. So what we did is again, focusing on the human capital asset, is we got all the local municipal police chiefs, about 3 county sheriffs, from where the majority of our employees were from, and 2 representatives from the 2 state police organizations, West Virginia State Police, Ohio Highway Patrol. Brought everybody in and said, hey, how in the future can we get our employees in here, get employees home in order to keep the business going? So from that, what we pretty much developed was going back, and we were asked to identify who are our business critical folks, who needs to be here. They will call their supervisor and ask, and they'll work through 4 questions. 1, what type of vehicle do they have? Do they have a 2 or 4-wheel drive vehicle that they feel safely to be able to get in? 2, what are the road conditions? What's the distance you have to travel? We have folks that live in Charleston that drive to Parkersburg each day. Certainly they may be defined as business critical, but that distance traveling would not be viable for them to come to work. So that's the way we looked at getting our business critical folks in the site. Certainly those folks who are working at the site that can't get home, there's some protection of them too. If they would happen to be working a job that we couldn't get somebody in, then we would pay them overtime. If it happened to be a non-business critical folks who were stuck at the plant, then we would afford them the opportunity to be able to stay at the site and provide what necessary provisions would be to support them. And they would be taken care of also.